Recording. Alright, this is the last episode of France's FIFA World Cup history. This episode's a little longer. It's going to cover the World Cup in 2014, 2018, and the most recent World Cup in 2022. Because of France's performances at these three World Cups, the video's a bit longer. But I hope you enjoy this one. Now, a few more World Cups left. The 2014 World Cup. Brazil were hosts for this World Cup. This is the second time that Brazil would host a World Cup. The very first time was in 1950. This would have also been the very first World Cup since 1978, where a South American nation would host it. Okay, similar to the 2010 World Cup qualifying campaign in UEFA zone, there were 9 groups. 8 of the 9 groups had groups of 6, while one group, that would have been Group I, had 5 nations. If you top your group, you would qualify for the World Cup, while the 8th best second place nations would all go through to a playoff round. France was in Group I, the group with the least amount of nations in, 5 as mentioned. France was in a group with Spain, Finland, Georgia, and Belarus. For a second time in a row, France had to qualify through the playoffs. France finished second in their group. Spain topped the 2014 FIFA World Cup group. Spain were the champions at the time. They were the holders. They also were the Euro champions for the second time in a row as well. So, yeah, Spain very strong at that time. The only competition for France in that group was the Spanish. As you could see in the table, that France and Spain had so much more points than the rest of the other nations, in their group. Okay, France opened up their campaign with a 1-0 win against Finland away. Diaby scored in the 20th minute. But then France beat Belarus 3-1. So it was a good start for them. They played the World Cup holders, Spain, at that time. Just about equalising, though. Spain scored first, Ramos in the 25th minute, but Giroud right at the end, 4 minutes into extra time, scored in the 94th minute, getting a solid point for France. France went on to beat Georgia 3-1. But in the return leg, this time France playing at home, they lose to Spain. Pedro scored in the 58th minute. France would then drop points to Georgia. Have a 6-goal thriller against Belarus away, where France beat Belarus 4-2. Then France went on to beat Finland 3-0, which was their last game. It wasn't enough, though, to secure automatic qualification. So France had to go through the playoffs once again. This time around, unlike the 2010 World Cup qualifiers, France was actually one of the unseeded teams. So that meant France would have to go up against Portugal, Greece, Croatia, or Ukraine. France ended up drawing against Ukraine. Again, nations will play on a home and away basis. France played Ukraine away first, and Ukraine beat France 2-0. In the second leg, France needed to turn around a 2-0 deficit, and they did. When they went back to France, France was able to beat Ukraine 3-0. Sacco scored 2 goals, as well as Benzema. Sacco scored the first goal for France in the 22nd minute, then Benzema in the 34th. And towards the end of the game, Sacco scored the winner for France. which meant France qualified for another World Cup. This time in Brazil. Last time the World Cup was in Brazil, prior to this, was in 1950. France failed to qualify for that World Cup, was invited to. They accepted the invitation, but later on declined it. So this would have been the first World Cup France played in Brazil. France was put into Group E. Honduras and Ecuador were drawn into their group, but a similar nation that they have played quite a few times, who were in their group in the 2006 World Cup, both in qualifying and in the World Cup proper. That's Switzerland. France started off well in their World Cup campaign this time around, where they beat Honduras 3-0 thanks to goals from Benzema. Next up, France played Switzerland in a 7-goal thriller. France managed to beat Switzerland 5-2. In the World Cup campaigns or qualifiers, this would have been the fourth time they met, whether it was the proper or during qualification. And this time around, France managed to beat Switzerland. No draw this time. Finally, France finished the group stage by drawing 0-0 with Ecuador. France topped their group with 7 points, Switzerland second, 6, Ecuador and Honduras got eliminated. France played Nigeria next in the last 16, where they beat them 2-0. Pogba scored in the 79th minute, and Yobo scored an own goal, taking it to 2-0. France was able to go through to the quarterfinals. They lost to Germany next, 1-0. Hummels scored in the 13th minute, beating France. Germany did go on to win in that tournament, becoming the first nation outside South America, the CONMEBOL, to win the World Cup in South America. So 2014, a much better performance from France, a younger team as well. But now let's move on to the 2018 World Cup. This is the second time that France do win the World Cup. Let's see their journey. So France were in Group A in the UEFA World Cup qualifiers for the 2018 World Cup. Unlike the 2010 and 2014 World Cup qualifiers, instead of going through the playoffs, they qualified top in their group. Their group contained Sweden, Netherlands, Bulgaria, Luxembourg, and Belarus. It's been a while since Luxembourg and France met each other during qualifiers, and Belarus and France met each other during the 2014 World Cup qualifier campaign. France and Belarus was one of the first games to be played in that group. That match finished 0-0. France was playing away. France did go on to beat Bulgaria 4-1, Netherlands 1-0, Sweden 2-1, Luxembourg 3-1. But there was a bit of a hiccup where they lost to Sweden 2-1. They beat Netherlands 4-0. Griezmann scored in the 40th minute. Limar scored in the 73rd and 88th minute. And Mbappe scored in that game as well. France did end up drawing to Luxembourg. That was a 0-0 draw. Now, after some of the games I've read between France and Luxembourg over the years, France usually beating Luxembourg by quite a lot of goals. In this campaign, Luxembourg managing to get a draw. And stopping France from scoring past them. It's a positive. But yeah, France finished their campaign, their qualifying campaign, beating Bulgaria 1-0 and then Belarus 2-1. So France topped their group with 23 points, and Sweden was second, just about beating Netherlands with 19 points to advance to the playoffs. Sweden did qualify for the 2018 World Cup as well. All right, now France in the World Cup in 2018, they were put into Group C where they met Denmark again. They met each other in the 1998 World Cup and the 2002 World Cup. They were put in the same group. They would also meet again in the same group in 2022 World Cup. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, in this group, Peru was the other nation as well as Australia to make up Group C. France played Australia first, beating them 2-1. Penalties and an own goal. Griezmann scored a penalty and Jedinak for Australia equalised the 62nd minute and penalty, making the game 1-1. But Behik in the 81st minute, he scored an own goal, which meant France beat Australia 2-1. Peru were up next for France. France beat them 1-0. A goal from Mbappe. Then finally, Denmark and France. That game ended as a 0-0 draw. France and Denmark topped the group. France topped it, so Denmark was second, meaning both went through to the round of 16. Just like in 1998. France played Argentina in the round of 16. I remember watching this game. I was at the Netherlands at the time watching this match. This was probably one of the best World Cup games I've ever seen between France and Argentina. Don't get me wrong, that final was brilliant in 2022, but I really enjoyed this match. This one was a bit more back and forth than compared to the actual final in 2022, where France did a comeback. So Griezmann scored a penalty in the 13th minute for France. But in the 41st minute, Di Maria equalised. In the second half, early in the second half, Macedo scored, making it 2-1 for Argentina. So that's the first time Argentina took the lead in this game. But Pavard equalised for France in the 57th minute. Mbappe then scores in the 64th and 68th minute, making it 4-2 at the time. So France took back the lead. Late on, in 3 minutes into extra time, Aguero managed to score, taking it to 4-3. No goals afterwards. France win that game. Again, one of the best matches I've seen, football-wise in general, quality game. In the quarterfinals, France go on to play in another South American team, Uruguay this time around. France manages to win 2-0. Varane scored in the 40th minute and then Griezmann in the 61st minute, beating both the first two nations to ever compete in the final back-to-back. France go on to beat Belgium in the semi-finals 1-0. Belgium were probably the favourites. Yeah, they were the favourites of the 2018 World Cup. Samuel Mtiti with a header. It took France to their third World Cup final, their third in 20 years. That's 3 in the last 6 tournaments at that time. France would then go on to play Croatia in the final. France won that 4-2. The scoring was opened up by Mandzukic, who scored an own goal. France leading 1-0. Croatia did equalise. Perisic in the 28th minute, but Griezmann got a penalty 10 minutes later, taking it to 2-1. Then Pogba in the 59th minute and Mbappe in the 65th minute made it 4-1. Mandzukic did get a consolation goal in the 69th minute, or ended up like that. The game finished 4-2. This was the second time that France was able to win the World Cup. That's 2 in 20 years. 20 years since they won it the last time in 1998. There's a few similarities between this one and the 1998 campaign for France. First example would be Denmark being in their group. So, as I mentioned, Denmark was in their group in 1998. France and Denmark both qualified together to get through to the round of 16. France beating the runner-up of the previous tournament. So, in 1994, Italy were the runner-up and France beat them in the quarterfinals in 1998. This time around, Argentina were the runners-up for the 2014 World Cup, and France beat Argentina in the round of 16. In the knockout rounds, playing two South American teams, two teams from the CONMEBOL, and playing two teams from the UEFA, Europe. They did that in 1998, beating Paraguay in the last 16 and Brazil in the final. That's the two South American teams they played. And the two UEFA nations, European teams they beat was Italy in the quarterfinals and Croatia in the semi-finals. And then in 2018, as mentioned, they beat Uruguay and Argentina. Argentina in the round of 16 and then Uruguay in the quarterfinals. And then they beat Belgium in the semi-finals and, of course, beat Croatia in the final. And mentioning Croatia, this is the second time where France did win a World Cup where they do meet Croatia. This time around in the finals, but in 98, they did beat them in the semi-final. Huge win for France, obviously. I said after 98, France was definitely taken more seriously as a nation when it comes to football. I didn't mention, but in 2016, they did lose the Euros final. France were actually the hosts of that as well. They lost the final to Portugal. So what a massive bounce back from that defeat, winning this tournament. This was Croatia's best performance at a World Cup as well. Kind of similar to France, their best performance prior was 98, where they finished in the semi-final. Kylian Mbappe picked up the FIFA Young Player Award from this tournament. Okay, now we are here. The most recent World Cup, the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. In Qatar, this will be the second time that a nation from the AFC was to host the World Cup. Take note, this was the first World Cup since 1934 that the host nation made their debut. Okay, so unlike the 2002 World Cup campaign, where France automatically qualified because they were the champions, this time around, France would have to qualify. So let's see how well they done in the qualifying campaign. The 2022 World Cup qualifiers in the Eurozone campaign increased to 10 groups instead of 9. There is 5 groups of 5 and 5 groups of 6. Now, the winner of each group would qualify The runners up, on the other hand, would all go through to the playoffs rounds. But UEFA added on another two best placed in league group winners would also have a spot. And that's if they didn't flat out qualify for the World Cup, finishing top or in a playoff position. So, for example, in Group F, Austria finished fourth in their group, in a group of six. Denmark was top of their group and qualified for the World Cup. Scotland, second, so they were through to the playoffs. Israel were above Austria, but because Austria has a better Nations League position than Israel, that meant that Austria would have another chance to qualify for the World Cup and would be put in the playoffs. But lucky for France, France didn't have to bother about that because they topped their group. They were in Group D. Other nations in their group was Ukraine, Finland, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and finally Kazakhstan made up Group D. France started off their campaign for qualifying with a 1-1 draw against Ukraine at home. But then they won their next two games, beating Kazakhstan 2-0 away, and then beating Bosnia and Herzegovina 1-0. The return leg against Bosnia and Herzegovina, they drew 1-1. France drew with Ukraine again, a 1-1 draw. France beat Finland 2-0. Griezmann scored 2 goals in that game. And batter Kazakhstan 8-0. Mbappe scored a hat-trick in that game. Also, 4 goals in that game. Benzema with 2 of his own. So Rabiot and Griezmann also scored for France. And finally, France managed to beat Finland again 2-0. This time, goals from Benzema and Mbappe. France topped their group and qualified for another World Cup. Ukraine finished second in their group and advanced to the playoff stages. Unfortunately, Ukraine wasn't able to qualify. They lost to Wales in the final of the qualifying, which meant Wales qualified for only their second World Cup. Wales, also the nation with the longest break of appearances, appearing in 1958 and then returning in 2022. Anyway, now we're going back to France. Let's see how they progressed through the 2022 World Cup. And this is an interesting one. France were put in the same group as two nations that there was in their group in 2018. They put in the same group as Australia and Denmark. This being the fourth time that France and Denmark were put in the same group at the World Cup, and the second time that France and Australia would be put in the same group. Tunisia was the other nation in their group. And just like the 2018 tournament, France played Australia first. Australia took the lead in that game, surprisingly. Goodwin scored in the 9th minute, but France came back, making the game 4-1. Rabiot scored, Giroud scored 2 goals, and Mbappe. That would have been the first of 8 goals that Mbappe did score in this tournament. France then go on to play in Denmark, where they beat Denmark 2-1. France secured that spot. They played Tunisia next, where they do lose 1-0. Karizi scored in the 58th minute for Tunisia. France then go on to play in Poland in the round of 16, where they beat Poland 3-1. Giroud scored in the 44th minute, and then Mbappe scored another two, taking his tally to 5 goals. Lewandowski scored his first goal at the World Cup for Poland, scoring a penalty in the 99th minute. The 2022 World Cup had a lot of extra time. In France played England. This was an interesting match. Toromeni scored for France, opened up the scoring. Then Harry Kane scored a penalty for England, taking the game to 1-1. But Giroud, with a header, took France the 2-1 lead. Kane did miss a penalty that would have levelled it. France was able to win, taking them to the semi-final, to another semi-final. France went on to play Morocco in the semi-final. Morocco became the first African nation to reach a semi-final of a World Cup after beating Portugal. Hernandez and Muani were the goal scorers for France, taking them through to a 4th World Cup final. That would mean that in the past 8 World Cups, France was able to reach a final 4 of those times. They went on to play Argentina. Argentina's the nation that they beat at the last World Cup. These two nations have also met at the very first World Cup in 1930. A total of 4 times Argentina and France have played each other. Argentina beating them the first 2 times they've played each other, as mentioned in 1930 in Uruguay and in 1978 in Argentina. In 2018, as mentioned, was the first time that France was able to beat Argentina when these two nations met. The 2022 World Cup final is considered by some to be, by many, to be fair, have considered this the greatest World Cup final. The game ended in a 3-3 draw. Had to go to penalties, where Argentina defeated France 4-2. The Lusail Stadium is where this game took place. All right, let's get to the match. Messi opened up the scoring with a penalty, making it 1-0 for Argentina. Then Di Maria made it 2-0 in the first half. And it looked like it was just going to end there for Argentina. 2-0 win. But in the 80th minute, Mbappe got a penalty, scoring. And then in the 81st minute, equalised for France, making the game 2-2. Took it to extra time. Once again, Argentina was ahead. Messi scored in the 108th minute. But France, in the 118th minute, were given another penalty and Mbappe scored. Mbappe became only the second player to ever score a hat-trick at the final of a World Cup since Jeff Hurst in 1966 for England. So the game went to penalties. Mbappe and Messi, 2 of the goal scorers, both scored their penalties. Mbappe scoring all 3 of his penalties, while Messi scored 2 of his. But Coman and Tremaine both failed to score. Martinez saved Coman's penalty, while Tremaine dragged it wide. Montiel scored the decisive penalty, making Argentina win the World Cup for the first time since 1986. They bounced back from that final defeat against Germany in 2014. France, disappointing setback for them. If they did win this, they would have been only the 3rd nation to ever retain the World Cup. and they would have been third because at the time both France and Argentina have won two World Cups, but now Argentina moved in front of France, now winning three. France didn't have the best Euros either. Well, performance-wise, I mean, they did reach the semis. They lost to Spain, who Spain ended up winning the final. But I'm sure they will bounce back. The UEFA zone has not started yet for the World Cup 2026 campaign, but we'll see what they do then. The turn of this century, France have been considered one of the favourites to win either a World Cup or a Euros. Again, since winning it in '98, they've managed to reach another three finals. So since this century has started, they've reached more finals than any other nation at the World Cup, reaching three: 2006, 2018, and 2022. Mbappe was the winner of the Golden Boot, scoring 8 goals, again, three in that final. He's now only the second Frenchman to ever have the Golden Boot. Just Fontaine winning in 1958. So, from the very first World Cup in 1930, the first World Cup that France did qualify for, well, was invited to and played in, where they didn't make it out of their group. 94 years later, France have won the World Cup 2 times and have reached 4 finals. We're just going to mention now their top 4 finishes. Spain, 1982. France were knocked out of the semi-finals by West Germany, and in the third place playoff, they lost to Poland. So France finished fourth in 1982. In 1958, Sweden were the hosts. France lost to Brazil, but they beat West Germany in the playoffs, making them finish third. They finished third again in 1986 World Cup, where Mexico hosted. They lost to West Germany, but beat Belgium 4-2. And in 2006 in Germany, they lost to Italy in the final on penalties. The most recent World Cup in 2022 in Qatar, they lost to Argentina on penalties. But in 1998, they beat Brazil as the host nation. France won. And in 2018, France beat Croatia in Russia to win the World Cup for the second time. There is a FIFA World Cup all-time table. I'm not sure how official this is, but they have France at 5th. They are behind Italy, who are 4th, in front England, who are 6th. Okay, those were my videos on France and their World Cup history. Again, a very rich history they do have. Hence why the videos were long. So I decided to split them into separate episodes. I hope you guys did enjoy this. It was fun making. Appreciate listening to this. This was the final episode of France's history at the FIFA World Cup. Appreciate listening to this. And the next episode I'll be making on this type of series would be Switzerland. Switzerland, another founding member. So yeah, again, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. And bye.